fantastical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL network.
Yes, welcome on in, everybody, to the Saturday Night Network for our patron feedback show for the Quinta Brunson and Lil Yachty episode of Saturday Night Live. My name is John from the SNN. Very pumped to be here with you all to wrap up the week and look forward to the Molly Shannon week. As we do every single week here after an SNL episode, we get together with some of our patrons, our greatest supporters of the podcast, to talk through everything from the week, answer your questions, and get excited for what's to come next. So very pumped to get into this particular episode, and we'll start things off by introducing our guests on the panel tonight. So first up, we got my man, Fred. Fred, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How's everything with you? Great show this week. Happy to.
Thank you.
Excited
our
to
show or our podcast or
all
the
your
actual
shows,
SNL?
this show, all the shows. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Fred. Well, very excited to have you back on the podcast with us and get to hear your thoughts on the season. And we'll get to them in just a moment. But first, I have to introduce our other patron we have with us today, joining us for the first time on the Saturday Night Network. It is Mike Lieb. Mike, how you doing?
John, it is an absolute treat to be here. Longtime fan and supporter of the podcast, and longtime fan of Saturday Night Live. Happy Passover, Easter, Ramadan, and importantly, National Burrito Day. If for those who partake in celebrations. So, John, I hope all is well with you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy celebrating to everybody, no matter what you are celebrating. It's so great to talk to both of you. I'm excited to get your thoughts on the season, on this episode, and then we'll get into your questions. So, Fred, I'm going to start with you. It's been a while since we got to hear from you a few months ago, and I always love to hear your thoughts, whether it's in the chat or on the show. So tell me how you're feeling about season 48 right now.
So I love season 48. I feel like it feels very fresh. I feel like the cast is really connected. I feel like they all get along super well, and I feel like it's a perfect transitionary season. In a way, like it almost reminds me of like a marriage between like obviously like this like the past few seasons combined with like a bit of like the Bill Hader era. Like there's something a little bit like fresh, a little bit quirky, a little smarter about like the sense of humor with it, and I'm just really excited about like what has come out of it so far. I'm really enjoying like nearly everything about it. So very excited.
That's great to hear. Yeah, you seem to be on the same page as a lot of people. People seem to be really high on season 48, more than just our community, the general fans, the casuals. They're very into the season as well. So I'm sure we'll talk about that tonight. But Mike, first time we get to hear your thoughts on SNL in general. How did you get into the show? And please tell us your thoughts on this season.
Yeah, my history with the show goes way back, has its ups and downs. Starting as a young kid, I was introduced to Saturday Night Live by my parents, starting with Dana Carvey's Choppin' Broccoli, right? Like I came from and a family of musicians. And so I remember being 6 or 7 years old and immediately running downstairs after watching that and trying to replicate that song on the piano or the guitar. And just, it's like that really stuck with me, and, cowbell, of course. But I think you and I are kind of the same age, John. So, come season 30-ish, right around, right before high school, middle school, it's right as that new cast comes in with The Lonely Island, Bill Hader, Kristen Wiig, and that crew. I really just kind of got hooked and hasn't stopped since then. Took a little break during college, and then right around season 40 till now, it's just been just a great ride to be a part of. So, yeah.
So how are you feeling about this season, knowing that you have seen a good amount of the show?
Yeah, and I'm obsessed with the history, which is what brought me to this podcast and the Saturday Night Network. So I love it. This season has been amazing. And, as with every season of Saturday Night Live since the beginning of time, it's going to have its ups and downs. For every Try Guy sketch or phrase that pays, there's going to be Elisa from Temecula or, the traffic jam sketch that we got this last week. So overall, it's been a great season. And I think with the cast and the writing refresh, it's, assume it takes a little bit of time for things to click, but I'm really impressed with what we've seen. And I'm excited to see what we will have for the seasons to come leading up to the 50th. And, just to talk a little bit about the featured cast members that we got this year. I know last year with certain cast members, maybe they didn't get a chance to shine, a la Aristotle, but Molly has shown their chance to bring their intense energy to the show that has, I think, personally lacked the last few years, and maybe what was the cause of some of the criticism. So having that energy and, Devin consistently bring the elevated sketches up, Marcel with his confidence and his impressions to Weekend Update and sketches, and Michael Longfellow just, doing everything he can, making an absolute mess of the makeup table and all the costumes he's wearing. It's really exciting. And to me, there's truly no featured player. Everyone is a valuable member of this cast.
It's really fascinating. And, we were talking a little bit in the pre-show about, the podcast starting and at the beginning of 46. And, if you go back and you watch some of those episodes in our early days of the podcast, one of the things I was saying was it was very season 50 focused. It was like, okay, this is our 5-year plan. Most businesses have 5-year plans. It was like, how are we going to get from where we are now, which was a little bit of a dark time in the world and on the show, to getting out of this and then towards what could be the year with the most eyeballs on the show. And now we're about a little bit, probably more than halfway there. And the show is a completely different show than where I started when I started covering this. So it seems like we've, done so much good at the show. I'm so excited to get to celebrate it week after week. But let's talk about this week specifically with Quinta Brunson and Lil Yachty. Fred, I'd love to know from you, how are you feeling about what you saw this week on Quinta's week?
I really like this episode. I left it feeling like super jazzed. I will say it felt uneven for me. I think some of the people, like I've heard from, that they were a little bit more bullish on it. I think the first half was phenomenal. Like if they just could have carried that throughout the entire episode, it could have been like one of my favorite episodes of the season, easily, by far. Like I think the cold open was fine, but like, the car sketch, the cocaine sketch, Bridesmaids was pretty good. And then Weekend Update. But then like the latter half for me wasn't quite cutting it as much. And I think Quinta was great. I think she blended in very well. Maybe sometimes a little too well, but it's kind of also like part of her charm and like what everyone likes about her. Like that's kind of like her style. So I think she did a great job. I thought it was a great episode. I left it feeling pretty good.
Yeah, last night on By the Numbers, Mike Murray was live with Andrew Haynes and Zoe Walker for a great episode of that podcast. So go back and check that one out. But I believe that Mike was saying, if I remember correctly, he was saying that this could have been the lowest screen time for a host in a long time. So, this was, in a way, Quinta really blended into the cast, and you said perhaps to a fault, but it's interesting because a lot of people seem to enjoy having that aspect of the show. And I think one of our questions tonight will address something that we can talk about when it comes to which host we would like to see join the cast. So we'll talk about that in a bit.
And I normally, just like to caveat that, I actually normally like that. Like I watch the show for the cast and like rarely for the host. So like to me, that's actually a good thing. Like when they kind of blend in, because I want to see the whole ensemble.
Absolutely. Mike, let's get your thoughts on this week with Quinta Brunson.
I have to be completely honest with you, John, and I hope the fans don't come after me. I personally didn't know Quinta's name. When she was announced, I had to look up Quinta Brunson. And then when I saw her, I said, oh, that's Abbott Elementary. Absolutely, I know. I binged the entire first season of Abbott Elementary, and I loved it. She was amazing. She killed. And I had high expectations going into the episode, and I was not disappointed. I thought when she went out and did her monologue that she could have been, I had written down in my notes, is she a stand-up artist? Is she a comedian? Because she fit so perfectly well and felt so comfortable that as a viewer, there was no line between host and cast member. She could have just squeezed right in. But as far as the individual sketches are concerned, I do have to agree with Fred that it was a little uneven in some aspects. I think the ones I felt less favorable about, I came back the next day on rewatch, felt a little better about. Specifically like Midwife was just a whole we can talk about this later, but I was so confused about what I just saw. And then on rewatch, I knew what to expect. So it felt a little better about that. But, that was eased by just how strong, the traffic altercation sketch was, and, the drug dealer and just Weekend Update. And I felt like it's overall one of the best episodes we have had in a long time.
Yeah, that was me with PDD, by the way, which I talked about on the roundtable. Was just that, like, the first time I saw it, it was so different that I think it caught me off guard and I wasn't able to fully appreciate it. But then on second watch, I think I enjoyed it more. But you guys, through the conversation, it's an interesting philosophical question about the host, which is if they blend so well into the cast, is that a positive thing where we're going to walk away feeling like, okay, the host was so good they could have been a cast member, or perhaps is that a detriment on some of the cast members that they're not good enough to rise above the host? And it's like an interesting thing to think about here, where you talk about like who should be standing out. Should it be the host or the cast, or do you want an even playing field? And for what it's worth, I don't think there's a right answer here, but it certainly creates interesting conversation.
Yeah, and humor is subjective, John. At the end of the day, I enjoyed the episode to the living heck, and if that is what I walk away with, then there's no complaints with me.
Yeah, I just want to see these people on TV, right? I just like them. I want to be their friends. Like at the end of the day, yeah, I'm pretty happy with anything.
Okay, well, why don't we get into our questions from this week? Thanks to everybody who sent in their questions, and we'll talk a little bit more about this episode and then start to talk about Molly Shannon coming in to host SNL. So let's kick things off with a great question from our friend and fellow patron, Connor King, who asks, I was afraid that this episode would be so over the top with Trump coverage, and I am relieved it was not. I recall the season 43 finale with Tina Fey having a Trump cold open, a Morning Joe sketch, as well as a Sarah Palin sketch all in one episode. How grateful should we be that the show is willing to take a different direction at this point? Or is the show just waiting for their commentary on all of this for the season 49/50, and we should enjoy this while it lasts? So, Fred, what are your thoughts on Connor's question here?
So, I guess my interpretation of his question is like, I wouldn't call it grateful, because like he's no longer our president, and he's no longer every week saying something like ridiculously offensive or absurd or like honestly comical in its own sense. So I wouldn't call it like we should be grateful. It's just like there's not as much buzz around him. And there's still plenty of Trump on the show, but I think that like it's possible that there could be more Trump going forward. I mean, with having JAJ doesn't help. Like I feel like if there wasn't JAJ, even the show would be like, maybe we should tone it down. We should step away from this. But when you have somebody that powerful, like it's kind of like, why not use like such a powerful person? But I think even the show has realized after like 4 or so years that enough Trump, or like let's at least like watch this a little bit. Like we don't want to overdo it. And I don't know if the Trump sketches, like you might know, John, are as much clickbait anymore now that it's not like Alec Baldwin and all these celebrities. Like maybe they're not as incentivized to do so anymore either. So I'm not too concerned. I just don't want like 9-minute Trump cold opens at the expense of like something brilliantly written by like a young future John Mulaney or something.
Yeah, I don't think they're as clickbaity as they once were, but this discussion sort of reminds me about the Obama discussion that was happening while Fred and then later Jay was playing him, which was, every president that's been played or personated on SNL, there was a take. And with Obama, they always struggled to find one because he was so normal. And it sort of reminds me a little bit about what's happening with Biden, which is like, I think, except for like the old man thing, like they don't really have anything else to play with here. But with Trump, he's always giving them material. So it sort of just makes sense, let alone the fact that like it's the first time in history that we've had a president become indicted. So naturally, they're going to cover it. But I will answer Connor's question and what my thoughts are, but I want to get Mike's first. So Mike, what do you think about this question from Connor?
Yeah, like it or not, political sketches will forever be a staple of SNL. Is really the foundation of what the show was built on in the early, in the mid 70s. These are the sketches that will show up on your traditional media outlets. And although us SNL, hardcore fans are burnt out on the politics, it's going to continue to bring in the new and casual viewers, which is what, NBC and Saturday Night Live want. We've had this conversation time and time again about Trump burnout, and it is real, trust me, but Trump has a hook, unlike like you had mentioned with Biden. But the choice to sprinkle a little bit of JJ Trump impression and maybe only every 3 or 4 episodes would be ideal to me. And I love his impressions. I think it's a breath of fresh air compared to what we had seen with Alec Baldwin. But it's inevitable that we will have a return to politics the closer it gets to the election. And for cast members, it's job security, right? So when it gets to that time, one sketch, maybe the cold open and a weekend update joke. Keep it at that. But like you had mentioned, Fred, let the slice of life, aka fresh air away from politics, continue to shine through to a young John Mulaney writer or aspiring cast member.
Totally. I think that there's a lot that could have been done in season 48 between Trump and DeSantis. I think that's the main, political thing that I think in another season, they would have just ate right up, knowing that this, big battle is coming eventually. And, who is going to play DeSantis? When are they going to, and eventually, we'll see what happens with this indictment, but could eventually we end up getting some sort of debate between these two people who clearly don't like each other. And I think in 46 or maybe even parts of 47, you would have had writers that would have made sure to put something in there. But the fact that we're, in this, middle ground between two major elections, and also I think that writers that are hired now are not necessarily as strong politically as they are writing slice of life or different types of scenes. I think that's what's led to them not overdoing it with the politics. I would assume, Connor, to answer your question, that in season 49 or season 50, we're going to end up doubling down on a lot of the politics stuff, not only because it's in the news, but because they will end up, hiring a couple new writers who are probably more politically based. So a lot of it has to do with the makeup of the writers' room and what we're getting from that, those teams that team up together. Like Mikey and Streeter are not writing, politics sketches and stuff like that. So, some of the new writers, we don't know how they write politics. So it's going to be an interesting thing to watch going into next season. Cool. All right, let's get to our next question from Jeremy Boulard. And this is the question I referenced earlier, but Jeremy wanted to know, if you could only add one host to the cast from all of the hosts this season, who would you pick? So, out of every single host you had in 48, let's take Steve Martin and Martin Short out. I think that's
thank you for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's take them out of the mix because I think that's the natural answer that most people would give. So if we were to remove Steve and Marty out of every other host this season, is there one that really stands out to you as the one that you think should be added to the cast if that was at all possible? So Mike, what do you think?
That's a good question, and thank you for eliminating Steve and Marty out of that, because that is the obvious answer. But we've seen so many talented hosts walk through the halls this season, and more importantly, we've had two amazing actresses just in the last 2 weeks, back to back, with Jenna Ortega and Quinta. So I think either one of those I could see filling that extra spot in the cast and really killing it. Again, I'm high on the last episode with Quinta, but she was amazing. She was confident, comfortable, and broad energy. And I love to see that. But, I don't think it's the last time we'll see either one of those walking through the halls of 8H. But, along with that, I could also see an Aubrey or even Miles Teller. But yeah, Quinta's my short answer.
Okay, Fred, who's your pick?
I'd have to go with Brendan Gleeson, John. But
really?
No, I'm kidding. No.
Thank you for that, Brent.
I think Aubrey Plaza would fit in well, because I think that amongst the female cast, there's nobody dark and dry like she is, so she'd be able to kind of stand out in her own way. Like in an alternate universe, I could see her and like Longfellow having like recurring characters of like a couple or siblings or something, because I think she can carve out like a niche for herself that would be kind of interesting to see. And I thought she was great. Like that was one of my favorite episodes of the season. So I would say.
Sorry, Fred, but what was that goth talk back in the 90s? It had Chris Kattan and I can't remember who the actress was. I could almost see the same sort of synergy between, like you had mentioned, with Michael Longfellow and Aubrey.
Yeah, I think like she'd fit like a unique kind of spot.
Was it not Molly Shannon with Chris Kattan?
Was it Molly Shannon?
It was Molly Shannon, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll see that next week.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe the two of you didn't pick this person, but to me, it's Keke Palmer, 100%. I think that Keke Palmer is like just brings that extra flavor of energy that I think would be great for the show. I think that Quinta is great. I think Austin Butler was good too. I think Aubrey Plaza was great, but all of them, felt to me like they fit in really well. But I think that Keke had the like star potential that sometimes we get to see from like a Kate or a Bowen, like at times, like that, where it's like, oh, okay, if Keke Palmer grew up on the show and was like a cast member for years, people would be talking about how this person's gonna like, move on from the show and be in all these movies. So I think it would be, besides Steve Marty, I think it'd be Keke.
Yeah, I agree with you, John.
Yeah.
Keke has so much potential. I would love to see her come back and host again because she needs to make up for the poor writing on this time around. Unfortunately, that episode did not resonate with me personally. I just didn't. Yeah. I think that she deserves to come back and have another try at it. And I agree with you. She would be an amazing fit with the cast.
For sure. All right, let's take this next question that comes from our friend Ken George Jones. Ken says, I know this has been talked about before, but for me, Chloe not only does a better job in more straightforward supporting parts than in her campy star turns, but I'd say she also gets a much more positive response from viewers than she does in those broader sketches. Do you think there is just so much fan support to go around for these pieces, support which tends to go to Bowen or to a lesser degree Heidi, or is that Chloe and those who write with her who don't know how to use her talents? What would you do with Chloe if you were an SNL writer? So let's address Ken's point and ask what we would do with Chloe if we had the opportunity to write for her. So Fred, let's start with you on this one.
So by broader, I'm assuming he means like the big impressions, all of that.
Yeah, or character work.
Like the character work. So I think amongst like our community, maybe there's an appreciation for the more like secondary characters, but I do think that like the average viewer, like plenty of people I speak to, or like even her own Instagram, it's like those bigger characters that she probably wants to do and that other like the average viewer appreciates more than like we may. So I think it's probably a bit twofold. I think that, right, bigger, louder, more unique always sells a bit more. She might appreciate doing that more. I mean, that being said, I feel like she's thrown in a lot of sketches. Like we saw this last episode, right? She was all over the place in like smaller, like I don't want to call them bit roles, but kind of a bit more of the straight woman. But like, so I think what's happening on the show right now is probably very rational. This didn't really come to mind to me because sometimes she really knocks out of the park with her characters. So I wouldn't want to tone that down either.
Yeah, Mike, I think part of the thing here is like when Chloe auditions for the show and can do all these really incredible impressions of people, naturally, you're going to get writers who are going to be like, okay, I want to use her talents and put her in those roles. But is that what's the best thing for her if you were to write for her?
Yeah, I think ultimately when you get to SNL, you audition, you go through the auditioning process, and you come in with your characters and your character type. The writers are going to play to that, right? So Chloe has done an amazing job with her so-called, you can call it campy impersonations of, Drew Barrymore or Britney Spears. And sure, maybe they overstayed their welcome. But I think naturally over time, and what we are starting to see with Chloe, I think now is that, she is a terrific performer who is now becoming more comfortable and confident playing that supporting role, being, kind of a glue in some aspects. And, as certainly as, just this last week, you saw the traffic jam sketch, she doesn't need the campy over the top character, even though her actions may have been over the top to Mikey in that sketch, but, to be able to elevate that sketch. And at the end of the day, I'm not an SNL writer, and I think what they're doing is, a great job this season. And, what they need to do is just kind of limit the number of maybe campy impersonations that they get per season, every few episodes. And, at the end of the day, you can't over season the chicken, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I I actually think this is like one of my favorite Chloe episodes ever. I'm just gonna be honest. Like, I'm not part of the chorus who doesn't, care for all of the impressions and the characters, but I loved what we got from her this week because, playing Mikey's daughter in that role was such perfect casting, and like she was able to add something to the sketch that really like, she could do well, and like she was able to be over the top with it, but not to the point where it necessarily affected the sketch. Obviously she's going to play the bride, and then I believe one of the pregnant women in Mrs. Sullivan in the midwife sketch. But then it's also her role in the bosses sketch, where she's there as the one who was being attacked by her coworkers, and she plays it there like so well, where you can almost, I guess she does laugh a little bit, but you can, believe that she would, be wanting to her coworkers. And I'm just like thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, she is cast so well in these roles. I would love to continue to see her do that, because I think that as a community, as fans, we would be open so much more to her trying characters and trying over the top campy impressions if she was consistently great in these other roles, which I think she's naturally a fit for.
Right. And even with that bosses sketch that you alluded to, she hardly said a single word that entire sketch, but her reactions, her facial reactions just was so phenomenal that I think, really demonstrates her ability to showcase another side that maybe we're overlooking in some regards.
Do you guys think that, like, why do you think she was cast in some of like not the bosses sketch, but some of the other ones over like a Sarah Sherman? Because like she actually also, like, you can apply this question to Sarah too. Like she actually does a great job in more regular roles as well, and could have just as easily fit like whatever that demographic is. So I always wondered like what goes into like the casting in that scenario, and like why one over the other. I guess she's
I think
a bit more.
Well, I think you have to
loud.
start with the writers, right? So you start with like the people who are going to put together the sketch. So in the case of the midwife sketch, you have Jimmy Fowley and Celeste and Bowen who are putting together this sketch. And then they're like, okay, well, we want to write roles for people. So in this case, they felt like this sketch needed a lot of women in the cast. You had Ego, you had Quinta, you have Chloe, you have Sarah, all in this sketch. Sarah's in the barbecue role. But basically, they felt here that with Heidi being the first pregnant woman, and then they needed sort of like a replica of Heidi. I think it probably makes more sense to put Chloe in that role over a Sarah. But I think these things are so case by case, to answer your question more directly, Fred. But I think it starts with the writers, and then once you start analyzing that, which is something that, really, to be honest with our listeners, is something that I've started, I think, to get better at over the years I've been doing this, which is like, start with the writers and then think about what they thought of when they designed the sketch, and then ultimately evaluate the execution, so you could sort of see the runway as it gets created. And I think in that case, you can sort of feel why certain roles go to different people.
And how much does sketch order play a role in this too, John?
A lot, for sure. I mean, in the case of the midwife sketch, which is the first sketch after Update, there is a major break between the traffic altercation sketch and the midwife sketch. Chloe obviously has roles in both. Now, in another episode, you may say to yourself, okay, if there is a big makeup job that needs to be done or a costume, this is where you're going to put the two sketches, far enough apart from each other to be able to get that stuff done logistically for Chloe. In this case, I don't know that needed to happen. Like, there wasn't anything specific here, but what you would look at for this episode is probably Quinta and Sarah in the bosses sketch. And that's probably why you had a musical break, I believe, between midwife and the bosses, to give Quinta enough time to get ready to be put in the Penis Brothers costume stuff. So these are all like little logistical things that you don't necessarily think about when you're watching the show in the first place, but they have a lot to do, behind the scenes when there's all these producers trying to rearrange everything.
And I'm sure they're also maybe trying to spread the love. I'm not sure if like they think about just like, hey, nobody's in any sketch, and some people are, maybe they're not that thoughtful. I'm not so sure.
Well, the thing is, you have to also take into account that it's not just the sketches you see on air that they're thinking about that. It's the 12 or 13 sketches that are chosen that end up going to dress rehearsal, that most of the time, every single person is in one. It's very rare when we have somebody shut out of dress rehearsal. And then once the sketches are picked, they don't usually take a look at like, okay, well, we don't have a Molly tonight, so how do we get a Molly in this? They just usually go with like, the best sketches for the night. So that's how those things sort of end up happening. Okay. Great question, Ken, by the way. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's take a question from, I'm going to go with Theo Nuala. Hope I pronounced that correctly, but thank you for the question. Do you think Mikey Day is at the end of his run on SNL? So obviously, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I've been on the Mikey Day train talking about how great that sketch was this week. I absolutely love what we're getting to see from him. So I'm going to start with you, Mike. What do you think?
Mikey has been a part of SNL since I believe it was season 39. He was hired as a writer, and then as a cast member 42, a couple of seasons later. Almost 10 years. And, it's really been fun seeing him this season. And it almost makes me wonder, with all this pep in his step, does this comfort and loose energy that we are seeing from him remind you of how some of the former cast members talk about their last seasons, right? How they're finally comfortable, how they're having fun, and maybe some of that the pressure's gone, and knowing that, they're just trying to make the most of the last season. So this is a good question, but I think, we're really starting to see also a continuation of his strong writing skills. Him and, Streeter are still writing phenomenal sketches. And week after week, some of the best sketches of the season are still coming from Mikey. So I don't think it would be from a quality standpoint that he would end up leaving, as much as if he ever got burnt out or felt that maybe he's ready to move on to something new. So we never really truly know when it's someone's end, but I don't even know if they really truly know until it's time.
Yeah, sometimes, when you're like a professional athlete and you're having this like really great season late in your career, you start to question, you're like, should I be retiring? Like, is this what I should be doing? And I'm sure that Mikey Day has had those thoughts, especially with a lot of his classmates and colleagues leaving, is like, is this the time to go? And the question will be, does he want to leave on a high, or perhaps does he want to just, ride this thing out? Because if it was me and I was crushing week after week in my 7th season, I'm not going anywhere, especially with people returning to the show right now for the first time in years. It would make sense for me, and career-wise be the right decision, I think, to stick around. I don't know if all the fans feel that way, but at least I would think that would be what he would want to do. Fred, what do you think?
It's also a matter of like to leave for what, like season 2 of Is This Cake or whatever? Like, like I'm sure he's paid like handsomely well, and he has like a writing duo that like is very successful. And I view his like pep in his step as actually like kind of like what happened with Keenan. Like he doesn't like, it's not like Mikey's like almost bored and comfortable. I think he's just having a good time, which is like, what more could you ask of somebody who's like still hilarious, still writing, like still pretty relevant, right? Like, he's not being like pushed aside. So like, again, like I don't know him as a person and his like thoughts like day to day, but unless he had some like incredible like TV deal or what have you, or something personal, I think he's like at his peak. And unless I don't know, I'm actually like thinking like he might ride this out to 50. I have no idea.
And maybe I can ask both of you, but do you see that, with the departures of, Alex Moffat or Cecily or some of his former cast members leaving, being, maybe a positive or negative to his mental capacity and being able to write fresh sketches with no, no barriers in that regards? And just, is this kind of a good thing or a bad thing that he is on his own without his bandmates?
And I want to ask him this. I mean, this is something that I'm hoping to get to do. I'm hoping to get to talk to Mikey sometime in the future where I could sort of get to the bottom of this, because it's really hard for us to answer this question. This is a question for Mikey, but I could only imagine what it's like to be in the building this season, knowing that, first of all, most of the COVID restrictions, like the limits in getting guests and stuff like that, those type of things are gone this season. And now they're getting like A-level hosts. The new cast members on the show are like unique and diverse and fun, and they have new writers at the show. Like for him, I just think he's reinvigorated because he's such a, creative, talented person. He's probably reinvigorated with the new blood that's coming to the show. I would, if he's having fun, I can't imagine why he would want to leave. Like, that's what I'm struggling with. It's like, even if he set out at the beginning of the season, this is my last one, I'm going to try and check off every box. I'm going to, have another David S. Pumpkins, and I'm going to bring back, old ideas and stuff like that. But like, given what's happening, I'd be like, why?
Yeah. Like, I feel like his bit on Weekend Update with Punky just shows that, like, I feel like he's just like a sincerely good guy and like is getting along with everyone. he's still writing great stuff, so it's not like he lost Streeter. So yeah, I mean, again, it's all speculation, but
yeah, well, we're gonna have his answer in a few weeks anyway, so we'll sort of get an idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if he's going, he would be the type of person that would have a goodbye. So I think we would know that as we head towards the finale, which isn't too far away from now. Okay, let's take this question from Joe Blogan. Joe wants to know, is Bowen nearing the end of his tenure? The quality of his sketches has seemed to have taken a hit, and he said on his podcast with Matt Rogers that he's not happy. Interesting. Okay. I have not listened to the podcast, so I'm not really sure exactly what he's said there, but that is sad to hear. I think Bowen's extremely talented, and I would think that he's just entering the prime of his career. Maybe the season hasn't been exactly the way he wanted it to go, but I think there's still a lot left for him. So, Fred, what do you think?
So, like, it's great to have these questions back to back, because I'd say Bowen maybe is starting to seem like the opposite, right? Where his shtick is kind of like now, like, you know exactly what to expect. I love Bowen and I love the shtick, but like I kind of already know what to expect of him in most sketches. And I think, like, unlike a season 2 of Is This Cake, Bowen maybe has more out there for him. Like, he's a bit like, his famedom is maybe outgrowing SNL in a bit compared to most cast members. So I could see, I wouldn't be surprised if Bowen, maybe this is his last season, but it starts taking a step back or starts thinking about like alternatives personally.
Yeah, he's an interesting case from an analytics perspective because he started really hot this season. Most people came in picking, thinking he was going to be the MVP. And I think he's had some really strong moments, especially in that first half, but I don't know that he's had a consistently high quality second half compared to what we saw in 2022. So, Mike, what are you thinking about Bowen's tenure at the show?
Yeah, and let me start first by saying I also have not heard this podcast that's in question, so I don't really know the speculation that is in question. But I've grown, as most people, to really be a huge fan of Bowen. He's great, but I don't necessarily see that decline in quality. The midwife sketch this week, looked like Bowen was having a blast. The beautiful gym sketch from earlier in the Woody Harrelson episode, again, another pivotal sketch in his career that you can throw in the best of collection. But what maybe we're alluding to is that there are a lot of quality players this year, and when others rise up, it may be a little more difficult to see the greatness that is Bowen Yang in every single episode. Michael Longfellow is just, again, I alluded to how he's constantly working that makeup artist to death, week after week on Weekend Update, whether he's just a tree for 1.5 seconds or, every week he's, Michael Longfellow is sitting in that Weekend Update bench, just, wigged up as much as Bowen was with maybe the iceberg sketch, right? And so there's a little bit more parody upon the rest of the cast members that I think maybe are causing, I don't know, Bowen to be leveled out, if that makes sense.
For sure. And I don't like to always, think about cast members or talk about them as far as, like demographics or sexuality and all that stuff. But I do have to say, like, I'm sure that, Bowen, naturally, as anybody would, feels pressure to do well on the show because he's a lot of people who are older than him have left. He was sort of put in as this next star of the show, and there haven't been a ton of gay men on the show, and there have been a few, but not that many in the history of the show. And I think he sort of feels that pressure. He's an Asian man as well, and also had that I guess, background of needing to like play certain roles and like how a lot of, people who weren't Asian played Asian roles prior. So then he was cast on the show. And I think there's just been a lot of like, big name, celebrities that have had their eyeballs on Bowen, and then a lot of people around the world. I think he's lived in Canada, lived in Australia. Like he has fans all over the world, and he has huge star potential. So I could only imagine that coming into the season, he probably felt a lot of pressure. And, it's not easy. We go back in the history of the show and look at cast members from other eras who were coming into their third or fourth seasons and were rising in popularity. And ended up, having a lot of issues, whether it was drug related or other problems outside of the show. It's not, like SNL is a pressure pot. So I think I'm not surprised that he may feel a little bit down on some of the things that are happening to him. But all we can do as fans, is number one, constructively talk about the things that we think Bowen can do better without necessarily hating on him. And number two, showing support when we can, because clearly Bowen is a great guy. And whether he should be on the show now or he needs to go somewhere else, we can all support that. So I'm thinking about Bowen. I'm sending my best to him.
Yeah, so I didn't realize it was actually that serious. Yeah, he's one of the best cast.
I don't know, but I want to address all those things,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and certainly we want our cast members to be happy, right? And if they need to take time away from the show, then do it. I don't know if they're listening right now, but if it's hard, it's important to be healthy mentally as it is physically and whatever. But we've seen nothing but stories in the past about how the gauntlet of Saturday Night Live impacts cast members differently. And so, again, if this is something that Bowen has struggled with or doesn't feel passionate about, I hope that he is able to find at least some comfort soon in whichever direction he goes.
For sure. And again, just as we wrap up this discussion on Bowen, again, I didn't hear exactly what he had to say, but all I can say is just that, like, if somebody is feeling, the way that it was described, I just hope that they have the support system between friends and fans around the world to back them. So sending our love to Bowen, because I think he's a great cast member. I think he still has a lot of great work to do ahead of him. So I'm really hoping that for the rest of the season, we're going to see some good things from Bowen Yang on the show.
Love you, Bowen.
Also, yeah. Absolutely.
Let's take this next question from Monette. So this is a little bit niche. Monette sent a message to us saying, I apologize if this is too niche, but I'll try and explain this the best I can. So Monette says, this week, Daisy Jones and the Six / Riley Keough were trending because there was a plot point in the show about a band playing on the late 70s version of SNL. I saw fans of the show online clamoring for the fictional band itself to perform on the show for real and have Riley host, essentially doing double duty. Would this be something you'd want to see SNL do, even if it's mostly just catering to something a small section of people online want? Okay. So I was trying, I have to be honest, I haven't seen the show or whatever it was. So I needed to look this up, and I understand it's on Amazon Prime, and it was based on a book. So Daisy Jones and the Six, and Riley Keough is the main actress in the show, who becomes part of a band, and they end up playing on Saturday Night Live. And I thought this was an interesting question. So first off, I'll ask Fred, Mike, have either of you seen this? It's a TV show, is it?
Yes.
Okay,
I haven't seen it. I just know about it because it's based off Fleetwood Mac, and I love Fleetwood Mac. But I've never seen.
I have not seen it. It has been high on my watch list, and I've heard about it. Certainly, as far as the question goes, does it warrant a hosting or a musical guest performance? I would love to see SNL return the love in some way. I don't know, John, if the history of SNL meta. Contributions going back and forth with other, TV series, movies, or pop culture. I would say the closest thing, Mike, that would come to something like this would probably be Spinal Tap, when they were a musical guest back in the day. And that was kind of fun, where you actually had future SNL cast members coming as part of this fictional band that was going to be a musical guest on the show. So I think that would be the one time that I would say that there was something interesting there. I don't know. And by the way, just digital short or something out of this. If they want to do this, I'd say keep it a digital short or a surprise appearance. But I don't know if it warrants a whole hosting musical guest opportunity. Yeah. By the way, and for all the young people who are like, what the heck is Spinal Tap? It's Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, and Harry Shearer. They're all part of this band. So, and they were the musical guests on Saturday Night Live in season 9, episode 18, a year before Christopher Guest and Harry Shearer would. And Dana Carvey, I believe, was in Spinal Tap too. Was he? I don't remember that. Yeah, he had a guest. Yeah, I can't remember the character. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that would be the most meta I've seen SNL get with guests like this. Fred, anything else on this question for Monette?
No, I think I agree with the two of you. I think it'd be nice as maybe a sketch or something, but unless they reach the legendary status of Spinal Tap, it would break my heart to see a whole episode go to them instead of like, you know,
Jonas
some
Brothers.
SNL. Well, no. Well, even more than that, it's just like some like SNL alumni, right? Like I don't know if
For sure.
if this show is not popular enough, just for like one wink meta joke, maybe it's not quite worth it. But
For sure. Yeah, I think like once SNL starts getting like fictional characters as their host of the show, like I think then we could like talk about where the show is headed. But I appreciate the question, Vinay, because it's very creative
Yeah.
and it's fun to talk about. And certainly a lot of people in the fandom would enjoy this. I just think it's like probably way too niche. Like I don't think enough people like watch the show or understand what would be happening here. And I think that the overall in 48, clearly the quality of the host is like moved from B-list celebrity to A-list celebrity. So I think they're headed in the right direction with that. Okay, let's take this next question from at Farshalities, who sent us a message and said, Molly Shannon is a famed SNL cast member. What other SNL cast members should get an episode to show off their natural chemistry? So I think if I understand the question correctly here is like, is there another SNL cast member that's an alumni that you would like to see return to host the show? So Fred, any choices?
yeah, I mean, the first one that came to mind was Bobby Moynihan, right? He's already been on the show this season. And then trying to dig a little deeper because of Molly's era, I think, but I might be wrong, that Tim Meadows has never hosted.
Tim Meadows has never hosted the show, no.
Yeah, so like I feel like he's been on the show so long, and like, yeah, maybe not everyone will recognize him anymore, but I've always loved him. Those are kind of like the first few that came to mind.
Mike, you got a pick?
Yeah, the list of SNL cast members that return to host is getting shorter and shorter, but I think it's imminent that we'll get a Kate McKinnon sooner than later. Same with Cecily and 80. And who knows, maybe a power trio will return, right? That'd be amazing. But, there's just overall a lot of great women who have never hosted. I look at Rachel Dratch, Anna Gasteyer, Sherry O'Terry,
yeah, I
all
love
part
Sherry.
of Molly's, era, who I'd love to see. Maybe they'll return this weekend, time will tell. But, or Bobby Moynihan, as you had mentioned, Fred. So there's, a lot of great former cast members. I could see that fill that spot.
Yeah, and certainly Vanessa Bayer would be a good choice as well.
Oh, Vanessa Bayer,
yeah, who can come back and do that. So that'd be a fun.
Well, and with her and Molly, they had that show, right? That was just So we could see her this weekend. Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. And this is a great nugget from our friend Ken in the chat, who said that Tim Meadows was actually asked to do a cameo in the Eddie Murphy episode, but had to decline. So that would have been great to get him back on the show then. Okay, let's take this next question from Ian. Ian says, if we were to get SNL alumni cameos during the Molly Shannon episode, who do you think would be most likely to make an appearance out of Anna Gasteyer, Vanessa Bayer, or Will Ferrell? So 3 people who have worked with Molly Shannon, obviously Anna Gasteyer and, the NPR, the Delicious Dish people. Vanessa Bayer, who is, we said had a TV show and is still potentially going to get another season with Molly Shannon, or Will Ferrell has been in many sketches with Molly Shannon. So Mike, do you have a pick here out of those 3?
I must have spoke too soon. I apologize. But, Vanessa Bayer with, they're in that show together. I love that for you, I believe it's called. And so I could see that from a standpoint of recency, just working very well together. And I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that there's a Will Ferrell appearance for a dog show. But I'm really hoping for that.
Okay. Fred, do you have a pick here between those 3?
So one of my best friends and I have an inside joke about like the intro to Anna Gasteyer, where it's like Anna Gasteyer. So I just had to say that in case he ever listens. I think I'd love to see Molly kind of stick with her contemporaries, and like I think Anna, especially with her own show, and then like you said, I think Vanessa probably will get her due on her own eventually anyway. But my vote would go for Anna Gasteyer.
Yeah, same here. I think that Anna Gasteyer was a very popular pick for a potential host this season. Don't know if it was a scheduling conflict or perhaps she just didn't want to or doesn't want to, have the spotlight as the host, which is totally fine. And if that's the case, would love her to appear with Molly Shannon. I think it's, really fun to get the 2 of them back together as Terry Rialto and Margaret Jo McCullen. So that would be great to get the Delicious Dish ladies back together for the first time on the show since 2010. So that's my hope. Next question that comes in is also from Ken George Jones, who says that with Molly Shannon hosting this week, there's been so much talk of which characters or impressions could return. What is the most obscure impression or character from Molly that you'd like to see again? Fred, do you have a pick here for something a little bit under the radar for Molly?
So I feel like she has so many popular and like louder characters. So trying to dig like deeper, the first thing that came to mind, but it just wouldn't be topical anymore, was her Courtney Love. Like I used to be a big Nirvana fan, and I remember I thought that was like a lot of fun, but right now it maybe not makes so much sense. So this is a tough one for me, to be honest.
Yeah, I'll give you a fun impression pick, which was Monica Lewinsky, which Molly Shannon did a lot of. And Monica Lewinsky was just tweeting to Elon Musk about how Monica was so upset that people were taking away the blue check. So that Twitter was going to take that away from her. So she sort of still is in the news, like not the same way as she was in the 90s, but that could be a fun impression.
Let's put her on Weekend Update. Weekend Update as Monica Lewinsky.
That'd be a lot of fun, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Mike, do you have another pick for us?
I said it earlier. I love that dog show sketch with Will Ferrell. It's kind of niche, but it was a reoccurring sketch in the late 90s, and it's always an easy laugh if you put dogs in a room with comedians. So, I love the synergy between the characters, and
Yeah, for sure. Is there any cast member? Well, I'll ask the question for myself. Is there any cast member you're looking forward to working directly with Molly? Either of you?
Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Any current cast member?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I could see her having a lot of fun with like a Sarah Sherman or a Heidi. Kind of playing.
Yeah, I'm looking at those high energy cast members, right?
Yeah.
So a Sarah Sherman.
Or like making like a Longfellow feel awkward in a way, like just like kind of some like over the top kind of flirtatious thing, or I have no idea, but I could see.
Well, I was thinking today, Go ahead.
I
was thinking also because I saw the promo, and she did Mary Catherine Gallagher, like hands under the armpits and stuff. I was like, sometimes when they do that in the promos, they don't do that in the actual episode. So I'm wondering if we won't be getting a Mary Catherine Gallagher.
I did see that. So just about like an hour before we started here, that NBC posted the promo with the Jonas Brothers, and they do the Mary Catherine Gallagher armpits, and I'm like, well, looks like we're not getting it this weekend.
I mean, could be throwing us off, but perhaps.
Yeah. I could see also Molly, though. I also could see Molly's energy. Yeah. They have so much energy that could
Molly
match, right? The physicality, and maybe, what if we saw a Sally O'Malley with,
a Sally O'Malley, maybe.
A Sally O'Malley. Yeah. SNL writers, I know it's probably too late at this point, but I hope you're listening.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's take this last question that came in from our friend Victor Higgins, in quotes, fan of the show and podcast. So thanks, Victor. With Quinta coming from HBO's A Black Lady Sketch Show, who would you like to see host who has been on a sketch comedy show, SNL and non-SNL shows? So these questions are always a little fun. Fred, do you have another pick for a host that you can think of?
Tim Robinson.
Yeah,
right.
That's a great one.
Like I think I think he was only on for a season, but like people love his show. He can come back and his monologue do the whole like making fun of the fact that he was only on for a season thing, and then have a lot of fun, like strange fun with some of like the younger cast members or Sarah, like his kind of style. I think that'd be
great pick. Mike Yowen.
On the topic of Tim Robinson, I want to allude back to this last episode with the drug dealer sketch. When he opened his mouth, the first thing that Andrew Dismuke said was, the girls in here are insane. And that sounded to me like it was Tim Robinson speaking out of Andrew Dismuke's body. And I'm like, are we seeing a little bit of Tim Robinson here? Out of Andrew
they've written together before, actually. I think in 46, they wrote that Jack Flats sketch together.
Okay. So they are familiar with each other in that regards. But I wrote all over my notes, Tim Robinson, ? But as far as who I would like to see host from another sketch comedy show, my answer is Eric Andre. I don't even know if that he counts as a sketch performer. he's just a great comedian. I would love to see him. And then also Jordan Peele. We saw, Keegan-Michael Key a couple of seasons ago, or last season maybe it was. But I understand that he was also almost booked as Obama in 2008 and was on Mad TV. So he has a little bit of a history with SNL, but I would love to see Jordan Peele host.
I feel like I have another good one, just if I can. I think Bob Odenkirk and David Cross. I know Bob used to write for the show, and then like if they kind of did like a duo thing, I don't know. I feel like that'd be great.
These are all great picks. So you both were fantastic tonight. It was so much fun to get to answer these questions with you. And thanks to everybody who sent them in. You could always check our social media to sign up and write your questions in for our patron feedback shows. Those will be up every single week on Tuesday or Wednesday. And then we usually do these shows on Thursdays. So thanks for everybody who checked out the show this week. Coming up next, we have our hot take show immediately after the Molly Shannon and Jonas Brothers episode of Saturday Night Live. And then, of course, our roundtable next week and By the Numbers. Quick programming note, there will not be a patron feedback show next week because I will be traveling in New York City, but I will be back following that for the hot take show or for the roundtable for that week. And then we will have a patron feedback show again in a couple of weeks time. So only 3 shows next week. Hope you're still getting enough SNL content from all of us, but that is the schedule that's coming up for now. And hopefully maybe a bonus show here or there along the way. All right, Fred, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Where can the listeners check out everything you got going on?
I'm just a regular person with a regular Instagram. If you want to follow me, you can, but no real content.
Okay, I'm just a regular person too, by the way. Just putting that out there. But yes, totally check what Fred's got going on. Mike, you were awesome on the first podcast with us, so thanks for joining us. Anything you want to plug for the listeners?
Yeah, I am also, for the most part, a regular person, kind of a cybernetic android as well. But you can, if you really want to follow me on YouTube, I'm Homstar, HOMSTAR. And then, Instagram, HomstarBHZ. So it was great being here, John. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks to everybody in the chat who joined us live tonight and who is checking out the show afterwards. So on behalf of Fred and Mike, my name is Jon Schneider from the SNN. Up next, we got some Molly Shannon. We will see you next time, everybody. Have a good